Hi, this is Ted Fry with Raptor Archery. Today we're going to discuss a tool that I designed and developed many years ago called the Nifty Nocker. The Nifty Nocker allows you to make a hardwood insert self-nock. Why would somebody want to use a self-nock rather than a plastic nock? Well, one, I feel that the self-nock is more durable and less likely to have a problem than a plastic nock. It's part of the incorporated main body of the arrow shaft itself. The other reason is it's handcrafted. Personally, I enjoy handcrafting my own archery equipment. A lot of times when you just cut a slot in the back of the shaft, when the string hits that under pressure, it can split. So by adding a hardwood insert where the grain runs perpendicular to the length of the shaft, we can prevent that from splitting out. The Nifty Nocker comes included with instructions, the carbide rod saw, an assortment of hardwood inserts, and the tool itself. The tool itself is two body parts. One goes over the top of the other, and there's a collet inside that squeezes down on the shaft. This allows you to use 5/16, 11/32, and 23/64 shafts without having to change the collet like we did on the old Nifty Nocker. The first thing you do is you insert the shaft into the back of the Nifty Nocker. Then what you do is you line up, see, this is the long slot right here, which is for our insert. This is a short slot, which is for our knot groove. We want to line up the edge grain, those long longitudinal grains, with the long slot. So we line that up and then we tighten down the body. We always want to think of our string groove splitting these V's in the arrow shaft so the longitudinal grains are against the side of your bow. Now that we have that tightened into the body, we can put it in the vise. Now you can just use the rod saw just as it is, right here, holding it between your hands. It's a little harder to use. Start at an angle and just work its way down. You don't have to apply a lot of pressure, just a nice, gentle, even downward pressure. I personally like to use a 10-inch hacksaw where I've taken the blade out and putting the rod saw in there. It just gives you a little bit more control. Gives you a little bit more leverage on a downward pressure, and it gives you less likely the opportunity to go side to side. And this is the way that the insert is installed into the groove itself. Now you'll notice right here there's a difference between the radius of the round cut of the rod saw and the squareness of the insert. So I recommend, before you install them, is what you do is just take a small piece of sandpaper and just radius the bottom that's going to fit down inside that slot so that it has more of a matching glue line. Insert with glue, and I like using a two-part epoxy, but there's several wood glues you can use too. I like the epoxy because it's waterproof. I don't recommend a fast cure epoxy. Fast cure epoxies tend to dry fast and they tend to be a little more brittle than the slower cured. Next, you want to take that insert and file it down or sand it down, whichever you prefer, to where the edges of the insert are flush with the arrow shaft itself so that it'll fit back into the Nifty Nocker. So then we install it back into the Nifty Nocker, making sure that we line up the insert with the long slot that we used to originally cut it in there. That's just a little off there, so let me just twist that and line it up. This way we're perpendicular with the insert to our knot groove. We gently cut down into the shaft again like we did originally, but since we're using the shorter slot, we're only going to cut halfway down into the insert. And you can make them a little shallower if you want. Some people prefer deeper knocks, some people prefer more shallow. That can be a personal preference. Then we take and loosen the Nifty Nocker again, pull it out, and I recommend taking the carbide rod saw, and you'll notice that the edge right here is kind of square, so I take and at an angle I recess that. The gullet is what that's called, or the string groove. You got to remember when your string is pulled back, it's going to be at an angle like this. So you want to have some recess in the crotch of the knot groove right here. Then you can take and round the nock itself with a file or a heavy piece of sandpaper or whatever your preference is. You can even use a belt sander if you want. Lightly sand it to shape, whatever you prefer. Then I like to take a piece of sandpaper. Everybody uses different size strings. Some guys like Dacron B50, some guys like Fast Flight, Dyneema, any of those. Most of those modern strings have a little bit smaller diameter than the older Dacron B50. So if you're using Dacron, I recommend you sand it out and feel it to fit on there. You just want it to fit snug but not too tight. And you're good to go with a hardwood insert self-knock that will not split out. Because remember, the grain of the insert runs this way while the grain of the shaft runs this way. Now all it takes is a little finish work and your personal decoration, and that arrow is ready to go. One of the other things the Nifty Nocker tool allows you to do is by using the long slot of the tool itself rather than the short slot, you can cut the slot for the front of the arrow shaft if you use trade points or stone points. With stone points, you have to actually spend a little more time sanding and getting it to fit the stone point, but trade points tend to be about the same thickness as the carbide rod saw, so that slot will work just as well for the front end of the shaft as it will for the back. To learn more, visit our website at raptorarchery.com or stop by our store and museum in the beautiful Columbia River Gorge location of Hood River, Oregon.